Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. We're not going to watch any videos, so I don't need to wear these. Um, so much is happening this week, although I only picked a handful of stories. But there is. We'll get to this. Louis Dejoy has stepped down from the post office. I saw that 20 minutes before I did this. I usually always have a little bit of a lie down before I do the news hour, and today has been busy and crazy, and I was writing a lot and working on some projects related to my writing courses, The Power of Story, and knocking a lot of those things out and getting some new writing content ready to go. So for all those who follow me for writing, oh boy, you're gonna have a lot of new writing content coming up. So that is a great and wonderful thing. I'll admit I'm a little bit depressed today. Life has been life. And life has been hitting hard as of late. Um, as most people know, ooh, I should have covered that more. I have a little spot on the side of my head. Um, as most people who followed this show for a long time know, it's it the Cameron Journal is a journey, and getting to this point has been a journey. And I want to thank everybody who has recently arrived. We have a lot of new people have recently become aware of me and the show and everything. Thank you. Please make sure to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're watching this on: Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. Share with friends and family. If you like what you see here, I'm sure they will too. But it is it's been a lot to get to this age of life, um, and still not necessarily have enjoy the success that other people seem to be having, all this type of thing. And I know it's been a lot. I lost a lot of them during the pandemic, as did we all. Um, a lot of it was a very steep learning curve because I had to learn how to do all of this and implement everything I'd learned elsewhere into this. And, I also don't, follow a strict niche. Like here at the camp, we talk about news, we talk about society, we talk about culture, we talk about writing. I teach writing. We also talk, we talk about the news. We do a lot of different things, more like an old school magazine, and I love that. And I love all the different people that come for all the different little things. And we interview authors and we interview interesting people, and I love that. Um, it's my favorite thing about this because my mind is always going everywhere, and in my brain, it's all sort of interconnected, sort of thing. Um, and I enjoy this journey, everyone that's coming on it with me. And it's been really wonderful to watch, as in recent years, to watch so many new people watching and so many new people interacting and all this sort of thing. But it is, being a content creator is a very difficult road to haul. And I think the problem is there's like the big names, sort of thing. And they all, do very well. And so everyone presumes that everyone doing it is doing really well, and that's not true at all. Actually, I've written about this, other people have written about this. There's kind of no middle class. You're either doing really well or you're making nothing. And so that's kind of been weighing on my mind as of late in terms of, monetizing and making this business sustainable and making it pay for itself and capitalizing on the 10 years of work I have put in to make the Cameron Journal possible. And then also thinking about, um, thinking about a lot of other, things in life, about emotions and self validation and what self love really means, and, um, and what you can expect other people to or to not provide to you when it comes to um, emotional validation. And I think I spent a lot of my life looking elsewhere for that sort of thing when that's really an internal matter. But the kind of the cherry on top of all of this is something that I read in a reply to something I'd written about this on Reddit. And someone said, life is fundamentally dissatisfying. And I'd never heard that before, or if I had, I'd forgotten that I had. And I had never really thought about that as an issue or a problem or, really something. And maybe I would have never understood it before, but it really struck me as, wow, my whole expectations for a lot of things were just wrong. Like, they just, I always anticipated, this, with the right thing, the right person, the right situation, whatever have you, that there would be a deep sense of fulfillment that would come from all of it. And I would feel really fantastic, and I would feel really proud, all this type of thing. And that's really struck with me because it's kind of like, if life is so unsatisfying, then what does matter? And what matters to me, maybe, is all very difficult and very confusing. And it's left me with a lot of questions about, where do we go from here? Is all of this still worth it? Is it time for a change? I don't know. And that's kind of where I'm at today. So I didn't pick very many news stories. We're not going to be here very long. But I did find some pretty good ones. Although, did I set up my news stories before I got on with you guys? No, I didn't. So let me open them all real quick. There's only a few. I think there's about 5. But there's some good ones. On the bright side, because sometimes I get caught up in this, I pick a bunch of stories I want to talk about, and we don't get into any of them deeply at all, sort of thing. Whereas today, we have a handful of stories, so we'll be able to dig into all of them, which is, I think, really, really great. So, so I'm excited about that, because then we can really dig into some of these. And so I think we're gonna start with, let's start with the funny but that's not funny news of the day. And that is, let me change scenes here too. Here we go. There we are. Let's start with the funny, not funny news of the day. And that is, Jeffrey Goldberg accidentally ended up in the Signal group chat of the war planning group between Vance and Hegseth and some others about the upcoming military strikes in Yemen. And the subheadline here says, U.S. national security leaders included me in a group chat about upcoming military strikes in Yemen. I didn't think it could be real. Then the bomb started falling. The world found out shortly before 2 p.m. Eastern Time on March 15th that the United States was bombing Houthi targets across Yemen. I, however, knew 2 hours before the first bombs exploded that the attack might be coming. The reason I knew this is that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, had texted me the war plan at 11:44 a.m. The plan included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing. This is going to require some explaining. And then he goes into the story, and I've ran out of free articles for The Atlantic. I'm not going to go try to find it in Apple News, because I don't subscribe to The Atlantic. But, this has been, the hot topic of the day, on Twitter, which has been, kind of hilarious, just because, no one thought... Well, there's a couple questions. One is, who had Jeff Goldberg's number in their phone and added them to Signal, and specifically added them by accident or otherwise to this group? Two, was it like, was like that the point? Was the whole idea was that, you should, like, they were planning on leaking this to the press, and this was the way they chose to do it, question mark? Anyway, as someone pointed out, in any other presidential in fact, it was David Beckenmeyer from Outrage Overload, pointed out, in any other administration, this would be it. I mean, imagine if LBJ just sent on over via courier a packet of war plans for the Tet Offensive to the Washington Post. Imagine the Bush administration calls up the New York Times and says, here's how we're going to invade Iraq, take notes. Like, or just starts casually, being like, oh yeah, let's invite this one guy we know who is a reporter to our super secret war meeting. That's level one. Level two is, why is this being discussed in a Signal group chat? Like, there's a process for these things. Like, there's a meeting, and you go to a special room, and it's all very secure, and there's serious medical suits standing outside. Like, it's a whole thing. And so there's kind of multiple layers of, like, why on earth did this ever become a thing? And I think the kind of entertaining part is that it's been not even 10 days, 9 days since this came out. And it's just now kind of hitting it today because Jeff released it on The Atlantic today, sort of thing. And it's... I mean, so if I spend all my time covering every flub the Trump administration does, that would be the entirety of the news hour, and we wouldn't discuss nothing else. The reason why I'm discussing this is it kind of makes you wonder what else is not being handled securely in the Trump administration. Now, we knew from the first administration that this was kind of a thing they do, in terms of they are very good at, maybe not necessarily following protocol, not necessarily, handling things in the way that one would necessarily want them to be handled. No surprise there. However, this is kind of a new low. Like, even for them, this is kind of a new low. And I think it's kind of interesting that they, that this has kind of happened and this reporting has come out. There's been no response from the Trump administration, by the way, so far about all of this, at least that I have seen. And it just is kind of like, yeah, take a look. These are the people in charge. Them, these folks, right here. All of Pete Hegseth, a bit of J.D. Vance, whoever this dude is, and a tiny part of Donald Trump. Like, these are the people in charge. This is who's deciding how our government works and operates. That's how it goes. That's what we're doing here. And I think I mean, honestly, it's not just embarrassing, it's concerning, and given the sensitivity of government data, both our personal data and their own plans and all this sort of thing, the fact that this could happen, the fact that no one realized it, all this type of thing, until this is quite embarrassing. The other kind of thing is that someone was like, well, because he left the chat at one point, someone was like, well, why leave? Stay, find out what else they're up to, sort of thing, And it's like, well, they probably would have quit using it after that sort of thing and deleted it and moved on. And it's not like it would be a permanent chat they'd be using forever, sort of thing. But it is sort of getting a secret peek under the hood of how these folks decide to do business. I mean, you can definitely tell they're younger because they're on their phones, they're texting, they're using, encrypted apps and all this type of thing. But I'm just mindful that, in 2008, they made Obama give up his BlackBerry because it wasn't secure enough, I think it was George Bush was the first president to have a laptop on his desk, sort of thing. And that was even second term, not first term. It's just, when you're dealing with this sort of data, you don't want just anyone and everyone to know it, sort of thing. And I think for, foreign adversaries, I think it's very, they're already obviously probably trying to target these guys' phones and all this type of thing. But, if you're a hacker, you really want in on that now. Because apparently these people don't have a clue. Like, they're just adding the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic to group chats about war. It's a very sad, state of affairs. But speaking of J.D. Vance, I want to move on to my next story, which gets into the whole Greenland, Denmark, Panama Canal situation. And this honestly this quote submitted for consideration. JD Vance, Denmark not doing its job, not being a good ally. If that means we need to take more territorial interest in Greenland, that is what President Trump is going to do. Oh, okay. What job is Denmark supposed to do? I did see, I don't know if it's in this thread or I found it elsewhere. But someone posted a graph of NATO spending by GDP. Denmark's one of the few nations that spends 2% or more. And so, and this obsession with Greenland, I mean, it's not like we don't have access to the Arctic, we do through Alaska. It's not like we don't, it's not like we don't have an air base there, we definitely do. And so, it's a very, it's kind of a very interesting, their obsession with Greenland, I think, is kind of interesting. Only 50,000 people live there, mostly indigenous. They're happy to be part of Denmark. They're not looking to leave. The number of people who want to leave Denmark is at about 6 or 7%. And so they have this very odd obsession with Greenland. Now, people say, well, it's because Greenland's full of minerals. Yeah, that's true. There's one problem. They're buried under a mile of ice. I mean, and to be fair, this is not the first time that the U.S. has had an obsession with Greenland. Truman tried to buy Greenland. Other attempts have been made to kind of wrest Greenland from Denmark, and people act like it's some sort of new thing. It's not. Greenland has been part of Denmark since the 14th century. It is Denmark. It's taken claim there for a long, long time. It is not a new thing. This is just someone. I will say this: someone is in Trump's ear about this. Somebody somewhere has some interest up there, and they are in Trump's ear about, we got to get a hold of Greenland for some reason that I will never quite understand until it becomes really obvious, sort of thing. There is definitely definitely an obsession there with Greenland, and I think acting like, quote unquote, seizing Greenland or having territorial interest has to do with Denmark not doing its job, I think is a quite, interesting sort of thing. It's, this one is a funny idea. Let's play along here. Day 1, Trump takes Greenland. Day 2, China takes Taiwan. Day 3, EU throws US out of NATO and stays neutral on Taiwan. Who won? China. And, it's, I mean, this also gets into the whole, seizing of the Panama Canal. The only reason that partly you don't hear about that much because of BlackRock. So with seizing the Panama Canal, Trump says, Jimmy Carter should never sold it to Panama for $1. We spent, hundreds of millions building it. It belongs to the U.S. All of that started because Panama was charging the U.S. Navy like double fees to go through the canal, and it was costing the government too much money. Then he says, all right, you can't have China in charge of any of the ports in the Panama Canal. So then who swipes in to buy them? BlackRock. So now BlackRock owns ports in the Panama Canal. Notice you don't hear a whole lot about the Panama Canal anymore, or trying to seize it. Although that does still come up from time to time a little bit, and he's mentioned, at the joint congressional address, the State of the Union that wasn't, he said, we're going to seize the Panama Canal, sort of thing. These sorts of territorial claims are really out of sync with how modern geopolitics has worked, probably since the end of the fall of the Soviet Union, and not, seizing land unnecessarily. And unfortunately, this is the sort of the purview of dictators and authoritarian regimes. One of the most egregious examples of this is Russia annexed part of a province called South Ossetia in Georgia, not the state, the country. And they've just took it, put up some barbed wire, have some troops chill in there, all this type of thing. Didn't care whose house it was, put it right across farmers' fields, didn't care, just, look, that's ours now, bye, sort of thing. And much as what Putin did with Crimea, much as what Putin is doing in Ukraine. Well, when does this start to sound familiar? And now Trump, thinking that he's Putin too, can just seize the Panama Canal and seize some or all a part of Denmark or whatever have you, with no disregard to the people, with no regard rather for the people living there or the governmental relationships. I mean, this, if you wanted to drive a wedge in the transatlantic partnership between EU bloc countries and the United States, this certainly is how one would do it. Speaking of the special transatlantic partnership, that gets into my next story. So, King Charles III is going to be on a state visit here shortly, and it says here that President Trump suggests he could accept any potential invitation from King Charles III to join the Commonwealth, as has led one fan to warn, you will lose 95% of your support base. So, before we get into this, let's explain what the Commonwealth is. As the British Empire was being carefully disentangled in the 50s and 60s and early 70s, a lot of nations wanted to maintain certain structural ties with the British Crown. This is why many nations still recognize the Queen, now the King, as the head of state. And some in the cases of Aruba or Jamaica have made that change, and God bless them for doing that. But the Commonwealth is really an economic block of nations who still have a certain allegiance to the British Crown and cooperate together on economics and humanitarian stuff and all this sort of thing. The Commonwealth was a personal passion of King Charles III's late mother, the Queen, Elizabeth II, in terms of maintaining equal and equitable ties between the British Crown and former British possessions. Now, the U.S. has not been a possession of Britain for a very long time. 200, and checks notes, 49 years. However, the King Charles is now extending an invitation to become an associate member of the Commonwealth. It says here, Trump responded to an article in the UK tabloid The Sun, suggesting Charles could invite the U.S. to become an associate member of the Commonwealth, which has the King as its head. There has been no official confirmation of the story, but the president wrote, "I love King Charles, sounds good to me," on Truth Social, prompting a clapback online. Trump's Truth Social post sparked numerous negative responses from supporters. "Mr. President, with all due respect, hell no," one wrote. "If we wanted to be part of England, we would not have elected you. We escaped the tyranny of England a very long time ago, and there is nothing the so-called king can offer which would be advantageous. Stand strong, straight, and proud. God bless you, and God bless Americans." Another wrote, "No, King Charles has been amongst the top players of the WEF," that's World Economic Forum, "for years. He's a globalist. Americans do not want to join their Commonwealth. The UK allowed itself to fall to Muslim invaders, and Charles has a secret offer for you? Hard no from all your supporters." "Hell no, we left UK and kicked their asses once," said a third. "Never going back. Personally, I don't associate with tyrants. All their Commonwealth can F off, scumbags." And a fourth wrote, "If he's giving you a title deed for Canada, you will gain 100 million supporters. If you accept membership into the Crown Commonwealth, you will lose 95% of your support base and take our country back to that which our founders revolted and died to get away from." Alex Jones of InfoWars also launched a broadside against the suggestion on X. "I've got a message for Donald Trump. If you really try to make America join the British Commonwealth, 1776 will commence again." Americans everywhere are shocked by President Trump's announcement that he may attempt to put King Charles as head of the United States of America, literally reversing the world-changing achievement of the American Revolution in 1776. The Post, which has been viewed 4.9 million times and liked 17,000 times, shows Jones saying, "When I learned this information earlier today, it was like a punch in the stomach. I couldn't believe it. So I went and researched it, and it's true. I love Trump overall. I love what he's doing, but sometimes he just does the most terrible things." He added, "It's hard to match King Charles's corruption and evil," and said British Prime Minister Keir Starmer actually does and may even surpass it. Some of the reactions appear to confuse membership of the Commonwealth with the Commonwealth realms, countries around the world that count the British monarch as their head of state, of which there are 14. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Jamaica are all among the group of countries that recognize Charles as their king, making them realms. Separately, they are also members of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is a separate organization, and associate membership would not make Charles King of America. The Association of 56 Nations is voluntary, and its website says these are independent and equal countries. It aims to promote global partnership and trade, which may be viewed by some as globalist, so it might incur some hostility from the MAGA base all the same. I think, honestly, this is Charles trying to save the annexation of Canada. I do. I think this is the British being like, well, maybe if we give them something that's almost as good as annexing Canada, they'll slow down the whole annexation of Canada conversation sort of thing. There's a state visit coming up with the king, and so that's where this is, supposed to happen. And this is where the idea is coming from. I'm sure that Keir Starmer in number 10 is trying to deploy the king as a way to calm transatlantic tensions and possibly calm down a lot of this Canada talk sort of thing, and the annexation of Canada, making Canada the 51st state, and all this sort of thing. I think it's an interesting concept and idea. I'm sure Trump, knowing him, would look at it as a business deal in terms of, okay, we'll join your little club sort of thing, and, we'll do some trade, and you can buy our stuff, and maybe we'll buy some of your stuff, and all. He's probably just as a business idea. He's not looking at it as, oh, we're just undoing the American Revolution, like some people are. Like, you can be a member of the British Commonwealth, but not recognize the king as your head of state. So, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your political persuasion, we could trade this guy for this guy, but we'll probably be sticking with this guy here. So, although I sometimes have joked that at this point I wouldn't mind Britain being like, we're just going to annex you. I'd be kind of like, well, God bless the king. Like, it's, we could do with some healthcare, sort of thing. But anyway, I found that rather entertaining. I don't wonder if it's going to happen. The fact that Trump's already been like, yep, sounds great, is all aboard, is rather interesting. I think the MAGA base needs to go kind of figure out what that's going to be like, sort of thing. But it's interesting. I will say, on the other side of this story, there has been a lot of new travel advisory, including from the UK, against traveling to America because of some immigration issues. They're stopping more people at the border. They're turning people away for having criticism of President Trump on their phone. And so countries are kind of advising people not to travel to the United States. There's some fresh numbers came in this morning that remarked that vacation travel to the U.S. is cratering, which is going to have wide-ranging effects for every major tourist venue of this country. That's going to have huge effects on amusement parks, summer travel, airlines, hotels, hospitality, resorts, national parks, everything, because people just don't feel safe traveling traveling to the United States. So yeah, it's hopefully they won't deport the king. That would be embarrassing. So I want to get into a little bit on where kind of Democrats are in everything, because if you if you were following my newsletter over the weekend, and you should definitely subscribe to it at CameronJournal.com, is about the new kind of where Dems are going in terms of the progressives and the leftists versus more moderate Democrats. Ezra Klein came out with a new book called Abundance, where he talks about that, liberal people should be in favor of building things, building more housing, building more infrastructure, really expanding and kind of getting away from the more degrowth, politics of the past, and then a lot of the environmental reviews and things that were passed in the 70s to solve the problems of the 70s, which were pollution, clean air, clean water, all this type of thing, need to really be reviewed and in many cases scaled back in of absolutely massive way. And that has kind of come in right at the same time that a lot of moderate Democrats are, really kind of saying, oh, we need to go in a more moderate direction. Now, this does not surprise me because I said Democrats will go moderate, they'll dump all the social solutions, all the conversations we've been having around LGBTQIA issues, race issues, structural economic issues is all going to get chucked. That whole thing is over, done with, ixnayed, completely gone out sort of thing. And this story in Politico rather proves my point. Shall we begin? Moderate Democrats are on a tear. Democrats are overperforming at the state level, with centrist candidates flipping one seat and coming close in another in special elections in deep red parts of Iowa. Rahm Emanuel, who once orchestrated a takeover of the House by recruiting Blue Dog Democrats, is eyeing a 2028 bid for president, and leading Democrats like Gavin Newsom and Chuck Schumer are rebuffing the left, the California governor siding against trans players in women's sports, and the Senate Minority Leader veering away from progressive demands to shut down the government. Moderates are having their moment, said Jonathan Cott, a one-time senior advisor to the former centrist Joe Manchin of West Virginia. I think people are realizing that there are many reasons we lost in 2024, but in acquiescence to all the liberal groups and fighting and dying on hills about 1 and 2 and 3% of the voting population seemed really dumb. A fresh batch of public polling over the weekend showed the Democratic Party facing its worst image crisis in some time. An NBC News poll showed more than half of independents have an unfavorable view of the party. Just 11% of independents have a positive view of Democrats, which could explain why Democrats are pivoting to reach these voters. Even their own polling sees a move towards the center. In the party's latest internal survey in congressional battlegrounds, the vast majority of voters, 69%, say Democrats were, quote, too focused on being politically correct, while 51% said the party is elitist, according to a poll conducted by the Democrat group researcher Navigator Research. It's a reaction to what happened in the wake of the Trump victory in 2016, where the party did move pretty radically to the left on a whole bunch of things, and the country sort of did too, particularly after the murder of George Floyd. Said Matt Bennett, the vice president of Third Way. The centrist group that has called for banning far-left candidate questionnaires pushed back against far-left staffers and groups and exerted a disproportionate influence on policy and messaging, and, quote, own the failures of democratic governance in large cities. The progressive and activist wing of the party isn't rolling over. Populist champion Bernie Sanders is drawing large crowds in the Midwest. Liberal activists are organizing against massive budget cuts, and progressives are warning a primary challenge to Schumer. I should note about the Bernie Sanders rallies, and I talked about this last week, but we're going to mention it again. And the Bernie Sanders people are going to be butthurt. And the people listen to the show are going to be butthurt. Bernie Sanders cannot get black people to vote for him. Sorry, he can't. Black people are kind of like, no thank you. We've said no thank you for 10 years. That's just not going to be a thing. That's not going to be a thing. And a lot of Bernie Sanders and AOC were at my undergrad college last week and got 11,000 people to show up at, University of Colorado in Greeley in, 80% Trump voting red Weld County. Here's the reality. Colorado is a very white state, and that's a very white campus. When I went there, 15 years ago, there were literally 450 black kids on the campus. We all knew each other pretty much. Like, it was very, very small. And so the fact that they're not going into the South, into areas that are more diverse, that are, big cities, and like that is honestly pretty telling. I'm glad they're doing so well in the Midwest. If you want to try to make that the future of the party, you've got to convince the party it's a good idea. And Bernie Sanders never has. And AOC, I love her, but she's in a safe blue district in New York City. Go sell that in South Carolina. Okay? Try selling that in Texas. Maybe wander on down to Florida. See what you can do down there. Take a flight out to Arizona. Places you need to win. Nevada. Let's see what's happening in Nevada. These are the places you need to win, and unfortunately the reality is I think they would be surprised at who does not show up in those places when they get out of some of the places they're at. Speaking of elitist. But we'll continue. But the revolution is happening in a quieter way for centrists. Far from Washington, there are signs at the state level that moderate Democrats are doing extremely well in districts Trump captured only a few months ago. In an Iowa State House special election last week, the Democratic candidate, though ultimately losing, outperformed Kamala Harris by 24 points. That performance by Democrat Nanette Griffin came on the heels of the party flipping a state Senate seat in Iowa and solidifying legislative majorities in Virginia. And it bolstered centrist Democrats' argument that Democrats in the Trump era can motivate voters with meat and potatoes messaging around everyday costs. The Iowa results build on Democrats' string of successes in state legislative special elections this year, which the party is pointing to as a measure of enthusiasm ahead of the midterms. What I am noticing is just a rejuvenation within the Democrats across the state, said Senator Mike Zimmer, who picked up a GOP seat in rural eastern Iowa in January that Trump won by 21 points. If we work hard and we really come together and we have an organized plan, we can be much more competitive. And it isn't just Iowa. Democrats are seizing on federal job losses as an issue in Pennsylvania's special elections, slated for the end of March, too, where they're pressing a more economic than ideological message. In one state Senate district where federal workers have been furloughed, quote, a lot of people have felt that it's not being done in a gracious manner. A lot of people also think it's just utter chaos, unquote, said James Maloney, the Democratic mayor of East Petersburg, Pennsylvania, who's hoping to flip a GOP district. Maloney called Zimmer the day after his victory to learn his playbook and has adopted a similar economic message in his own campaign. Quote, as chaos reigns in Washington, Democrats have meaningful and winnable opportunities to push back on the MAGA agenda through state legislative special elections, said Heather Williams, president of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, which is focused on electing Democrats to state legislatures. The political implications for Schumer and Newsom are far from clear, and the results of a handful of special elections hardly foretell a Democratic comeback in Iowa. True. Democrats have historically done well before in the part of the state with a dense population of blue-collar workers, and Republicans maintain a tight power grip in Iowa. These special elections can be, not always a harbinger or the canary in the coal mine that folks want them to be, said GOP strategist Tyler Campbell. Still, Democrats are flexing their muscles, convinced that an economic message and use of Elon Musk's slash and burn approach to cutting government as a cudgel can lift the party across the map. It's the energy factor, said Iowa State Rep J.D. Schulten. Our side is very energized because we're irate with what's happening. We're seeing this as a national trend. People are fed up and disgusted with what they're seeing out in D.C., and they're trying to do something about it. In Washington, Schumer has shifted to the left since the years when he described himself as an angry centrist, and the criticism of him from within the party is not limited to progressives, but his vote last week was a repudiation of the protest politics of the party's activist class. Quote, we have to reckon with the fact that young people, working class people, people of color, the backbone of the Democratic Party, are moving away from the party, said Stevie O'Hanlon, political director for the Sunrise Movement. O'Hanlon said, I think Chuck Schumer is part of that reason. But for some in the party, provoking the left may be the point. In challenging party orthodoxy on trans rights, Newsom joined Emanuel in tacking to the center, saying he was done, quote, with discussion of locker rooms, unquote, and, quote, done with the discussion of bathrooms, unquote, and wanted instead to have a, quote, conversation about the classroom. All of this is in line with the kind of cultural war retrenchment for which the party's most pragmatic voices are practically pleading. Quote, there was this enormous shift in the culture and in our politics, and some of that was very good and some of it went too far, Third Ways Bennett said, and I think what we saw in 2024 was voters saying, whoa, we don't think that the shift that the Democratic Party has taken was calibrated correctly. It went too far on a whole bunch of things. You heard it here first. You heard it here first. I told you. And it has happened, and it's, there's the whole leftist progressive movement that has existed since the Obama era is done. That's over. We're gonna go to someplace else. The focus is gonna be on the economy, and a lot of people are gonna get left behind. It's not without consequence. And I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying I'm happy about it. I'm not. But it's just really tough because I felt, and I think a lot of other people felt, the country was moving forward. We were finally dealing with and addressing the issues that had been festering for so long, things that we hadn't talked about in decades. We were articulating a new language, a new vision for the future, something that was more reflective of the country we live in, not the country we wish we had, and it's all gone. It's done. We lost. And I only hope that at least culturally, in our minds, in our hearts, in our language. We keep the best parts of that. But I know that we're not going to have a serious discussion on race and systemic racism and systemic inequalities in this country again for a generation or more. We're not going to have a conversation about LGBTQA rights for a generation or more. We're not going to be, these are no longer topics of progress where the country is moving forward. No one cares. There's other bigger issues, and the Democrats digging in on those things and honestly finally being the progressive champions we kind of always wanted them to be, but that they were never really, but that they kind of sort of intimated they were trying to be. Yeah, this is going to be ongoing tension for quite some time, and honestly, this is where I wish we had about 5 political parties, because if we could have a center left party and a farther left party, I think both sides would be much happier, to be very honest with you. Now, that's not practical in our system of government, but this is where I wish we had 5 parties, because I would much rather, I would much rather have kind of a choice to, who's saying what, who has a great all this type of thing, and and maybe be able to vote for different candidates at different levels from different political parties that express the nuances of my views. Unfortunately, I'm stuck with this guy. So, before we do that, I do want to gloss over quickly the story I mentioned in the monologue about Joy stepping down. Here it is from Reuters and Apple News. It says here that U.S. Postmaster General Dejoy, who said earlier this month that he had asked the government efficiency team led by Elon Musk for assistance with a number of issues, is resigning effective Monday. Dejoy, who has headed the agency since 2020 in February, said he had asked the Postal Service Governing Board to identify his successor, but had given no indication in recent days that he planned to step down abruptly. Republican President Donald Trump said in February that he was considering merging the United States Postal Service with the Commerce Department, a move Democrats said would violate federal law. Quote, much work remains that is necessary to sustain our positive trajectory, Dejoy said in a statement, adding that the Deputy Postmaster General Doug Tolino will head the agency until the Postal Board names a permanent successor. They have hired a search firm, he added. Dejoy has led a dramatic effort to restructure USPS over the last 5 years, including cutting forecast cumulative losses over a decade to $80 billion from $160. The outgoing postal chief has used tactics similar to the Musk-led Department of Government Efficiency team, including shrinking the workforce and canceling or renegotiating contracts. 2 media outlets reported last month that Trump was preparing to issue an executive order to fire the USPS's Board of Governors. Musk said this month he thought the USPS should be privatized. USPS, an agency with 635,000 employees that lost $9.5 billion last year, has been exempt from the DOGE-directed federal employee reductions. The White House did not immediately comment on whether it had any involvement in Dejoy's departure. Last week, the White House had forced out the chief executive of the U.S. Passenger Rail Road Service, Amtrak. So, that's fun times. There, I remember the hubbub when Dejoy was elected, and the damage he caused and the damage that he has caused and why the Postal Service doesn't work anymore, to be very honest with you. So, it'll be interesting to see where this goes from here. I could definitely see this as a way for, especially since Trump has called on eliminating the USPS Board of Governors, could be a way for them to get their wish to the post office. So, keep an eye out for that. Dejoy is out. Get rid of the governors. All of a sudden, you can do what you want with the post office. Which is pretty much the only constitutionally authorized federal agency. The Constitution says we should have the post office. Who knew? Anyway, speaking of government cuts, this is great. Why did Elon Musk go after bunkers full of seeds? Let's find out. In a climate-controlled bunker in an unremarkable building in rural Aberdeen, Idaho, there are shelves upon shelves of meticulously labeled boxes of seed. This vault is home to many of the United States' more than 62,000 genetically unique lines of wheat collected over the past 127 years from around the world. Though dormant, these seeds are alive, but unless they are continually cared for and periodically replanted, the lines will die, along with the millenniums of evolutionary history that they embody. Since its establishment in 1898, the United States Department of Agriculture's National Plant Germplasm System and the scientists who support it have systematically gathered and maintained the agricultural plant species that undergird our food system in vast collections, such as the one in Aberdeen. The collections represent a towering achievement of foresight that food security depends on the availability of diverse plant-genic resources. In mid-February, Trump administration officials at what has been labeled the Department of Government Efficiency fired some of the highly trained people who do this work. A court order has reinstated them, but it's unclear when they'll be allowed to resume their work. In the meantime, uncertainty around additional staffing and budget cuts, as well as the future of the collections themselves, reigns. This should unnerve every American who eats. Our food system is only as safe as our ability to respond to the next plant disease or other emergent threat, and a strong NPGS is central to our preparedness. Across 32 stations nationwide, approximately 300 NPGS scientists maintain more than 600,000 genetic lines of more than 200 crop species. The collections of some crops, like wheat, are in the form of seeds, but others, like apples, 2,664 lines, must be maintained as living plants in the open field. The scientists who care for them must follow strict requirements for sustaining genetic purity so they can provide healthy, viable seeds or plants to the tens of thousands of researchers and others who request them each year. But isn't it overkill to maintain more than 62,000 different varieties of wheat? The thing is, the NPGS collection of plant genetic diversity is not just a snapshot of what is currently grown to meet today's demands. It's more like a survival cache, our nation's safeguard against all future challenges to growing the food we need. For example, when a newly evolved form of stem rust, a devastating fungal disease infecting wheat, emerged in East African fields in 1999, an international group of plant breeders turned to the NPGS collection for help. There, among the tens of thousands of patiently maintained lines, they discovered previously unknown genetic sources of resistance to the disease. Those genes now protect wheat varieties around the world, silencing, for the moment, the alarm of a feared global pandemic. Just like human diseases, plant diseases do not respect borders. Such stories are common. In the 1980s, scientists at the Gene Bank in Geneva, New York, helped identify genetic traits that made apples resistant to several destructive diseases, including the deadly fire blight. Those traits have since been deployed in the rootstocks of over 100 million apple trees worldwide, not only generating more than $91 million annually in tree sales, but also directly supporting the nearly $23 billion American apple industry. This is how the system is designed to function. Whatever your diet, from chicken nuggets to organic tofu, the food you consume is the result of generations of work by agricultural scientists and plant breeders to meet the ever-changing needs of farmers and consumers. This work is only possible because of the availability of the NPGS's extensive collections of plant genetic resources. Such collections are the raw materials for the plant breeder's craft, and therefore of agriculture itself. They exist thanks to federal support stretching back generations. The future will certainly bring new crop diseases and pests, as well as the greater environmental stresses on our own crops from heat, drought, and flooding. In the face of such uncertainty, it is wise to gather and maintain as much genetic diversity as possible so that we'll have the resources to sustain the food system most of us take for granted. Even in the best of times, the NPGS budget is shoestring and its staffing minimal, given the magnitude of the mandate. And yet, with the trivial investment of 0.0008% of the federal budget, NPGS scientists quietly enable and safeguard our food system, worth around $1.5 trillion. Talk about return on investment. Moving fast and breaking things may work in some sectors, but the disruptions underway threaten irreversible losses of crop genetic diversity. Such losses directly undermine the United States' ability to ensure continued food security and dietary diversity amid challenges to our agricultural systems. For the sake of all Americans, we denounce any attempts to weaken the NPGS. The generations before us understood that it is the minimum function of a responsible government to invest in the long-term ability to feed its citizens. And this is written by Iago Hale, an associate professor of specialty crop improvement at the University of New Hampshire, also with Michael Kantar, an associate professor of plant genetics at the University of Hawaii in Manoa. So, that, yeah, literally, it's this. Here's the sad thing about this, and then we'll be done. We're gonna go. Here's the sad thing about this. And I was thinking about this, much of what the government does is behind the scenes, in so much as people are not necessarily aware of it as much as we may hope them to be. And things like managing our food supply, keeping seeds going, all these things, people don't know, and that's why I kind of read this story. People don't know about this stuff. It happens entirely behind the scenes. No one knows about it. I only knew about the seed banks vaguely because I did an essay about agriculture on CameronJournal.com in What the Hell's Going On collection. Where I had researched that the average person has no idea. They have no clue. And why should they? But the reality is the government does a lot of things that maintain our life, our society, our ability to do things, and the fact that people don't understand that and just want to break it all, I think is really concerning. I think a lot of this suffers from bad press. I think a lot of people just simply don't know or understand and presume it's all inefficient, it's all corrupt, it all must be bad, it's just shoveling into the pockets of people, all this type of thing. And that's just not true. I mean, the reality is private industry is not doing this work, nor would they. It's a cost center. It provides no profit at all. It's simply a cost center. Businesses would cut it out and it would end it, or someone would try to buy it and lease it or come up with some sort of model or some sort of fee subscription thing to try to make money off of it. And it would probably fail and all this sort of thing. I mean, this is where government is at its best. This is where government does tremendous things incredibly well. And it's really sad to see it bashed apart by someone who doesn't understand what they're doing. So, on that cheery note, I hope you don't like apples. They get diseased a lot. They're entirely artificial. We invented them, by the way. Just like the orange. The Valencia orange. Entirely invention of mankind. Although it is fun fact, there are a whole huge variety of apples. Not just Red Delicious. I love a Granny Smith. I love a Fuji. So go eat those while you still can, because we don't have them for very many years longer. So, my name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. Thank you so much for watching. We have a really great interview this week with one of those sovereign citizen guys named Kirk Beck. He likes to use government laws and things to get around actually participating in society. And if you've never met one of these guys, I've met several, used to work for one. If you've never met one of these guys, oh boy, you should go listen to this interview. It's interesting. He's a bit of a slow talker. It's a little bit of a journey, but you'll love it. You should definitely go check it out and watch me be endlessly frustrated with some of the things that he says. That should be entertainment value enough for you. And then, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter this week. We have a lot of great, exciting content coming out on the Cameron Journal, as I said at the top of the hour. So, feel free to check that out. Make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Cameron Cowan, TikTok at Cameron Journal. If you're a business person and want exclusive insights to business markets and how all this affects your business, make sure to follow me on LinkedIn and subscribe to my newsletter. Otherwise, that's all I got for you folks. So, this is the Cameron Journal Newshour. My name is Cameron Cowan. I appreciate you. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.